Hello everybody and welcome back to another one of these videos. My name is Kaylin and I generally find a lot of creepy Reddit stories that I share with you guys on the channel. If you have any experiences yourself that you'd like to share with me, you can contact me on Instagram. I'm very open to any experiences you guys have and would always love to tell the stories here anyway. But if you like these kind of stories, please leave a like and subscribe. It does help the channel. But anyway, enjoy today's story. Back in 2013, me and my cousin had an encounter with the Moho Man, also known as Bigfoot. So, me and my cousin were both 18 at the time. We just finished our last year in high school, and we were on our end of the year holidays, and we both had no idea on what we were going to do on our break. My cousin suggested that we go spend a week up in the coast with one of our grandfathers. Now, before I move on, we live in a small town called Gisborne, 40,000 population. And the coast is pretty much the rural area of my town. All bush and forest, pretty much. And our family has a homestead in a small settlement called Waipiro Bay. Our grandfather was happy we were there to spend some time with him. I was happy to be there too. Just something about being in the bush just relaxes and clears my mind. Anyway, after a long day of hearing sheep and cutting of wood, our grandfather told us that we should go spotlighting for eels for our dinner. We waited till around 8 p.m. and off we went. Now my grandfather's house is on a hill, and right below it, at the back of his house, is the trail that leads to a creek trail. The creek trail is about a 1-hour walk and the sides is fully covered in thick brush. Unfortunately, the eels were too small to catch. We get to the end of the trail and turned back the way we came. As we were walking back, we started to hear these noises, weird squeals coming from the left side of the bushes. So we stopped, turned our head torches off, and just listened. In my mind, I thought it was just wild boar running around, and my cousin said the same thing as well. We turned our torches back on and carried on through the creek. About 5 minutes later, we hear the squeals again, but this time they were louder and closer, and something was rubbishing through the bushes. We stopped, turned our torches off, and listened. We both faced where the noise was coming from, and we could see this black silhouette staring at us. My cousin reached to turn his headlamp on, and there he was, staring right at us, the Moho Man. His face covered in thick black/greyish hair, orange/yellow bright eyes, teeth like a canine, hands as big as my head. He looked at us and he let out this big huff and stepped back into the bushes, and off he went. Me and my cousin both just looked at each other, let a sigh of relief out, and carried on back to the house. We never said a word on our way back, just silent. When we get back to the house, my grandfather says, "No luck on the eels?" And my cousin replies, "I think we just saw the Moho Man." My grandfather looks at us and says, "Yeah, I've seen him around, hear him a few times as well. I just let him be." I was shocked when he said that. I was like, "Wait, you've seen him too?" My grandfather said, "Yep, I've seen him when I'm out hunting. He's come to the house a few times too, but he doesn't come close enough though. So I just let him be." And he also told us he didn't want us to go out and look for him either, like we were going to do that. But my grandfather believes that the Moho Man is some ancient guardian that watches over the local forest near him. I'm 28 now, and I still think nights at times the only other person I've told the story to is my partner. She believed me. She's also had some pretty weird encounters/experiences before we met. So I live in Warrior, Alabama, which is Native American land, such as the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Creek. But I was over at my friend's Matthew's house, along with 2 others, Roman and Damon, and all of us heard things in the woods like stomping, running, and snapping of twigs and whatnot. Along with it all, we went back inside to chill out, and we went back outside. This all took place around like 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. But as we were outside, the tree that was right beside his back porch was all scratched up. After all of this, Damon and Roman went back home as I stayed. We all saw the same type of animal. It was pale, slim, and tall. I walked out to where we saw it, and the footprints was bigger than a bear's. Later that night, when I was asleep, I had a dream. That dream had me and Matthew in the woods. His backwoods consists of about 2 acres of woods with trails winding through them. On the trails, we stopped to see the same type of creature standing in front of us. It was swaying its head left and right like a snake's head. What makes it even more weird is that I was seeing it from its eyes. There was terror in Matthew's eyes, but I was slightly smiling. Now the entire point of this is to ask any sort of indigenous person or skinwalker expert to give me some sort of explanation of what that was. I had a friend show me this underground bunker in the desert. We had to go through a tunnel that went through a steep hill. A short distance away on the other side was the bunker. We went into it to explore and it gave me a bad feeling, especially since I thought anyone could cover the entrance and we'd be trapped. So we left pretty quickly. I remember hearing weird noises, and when we got back to the tunnel, we could see a person on the other side. We approached and they basically walked out of sight, but there wasn't really anywhere else to go. So we expected to meet them on the other side, but when we came out of the tunnel, it was gone. We heard another weird noise and turned around and the creature was on the other side of the tunnel, and again walked out of sight. At this point we were freaked out since there was no way anyone could get to the other side without going through that tunnel. This happened years ago, and honestly, it was such a freaky experience that I stopped exploring altogether. I can't say what I saw, but I strongly believe it was not human. If I had to make a guess, I would say maybe it was a lizard person. Around 3 to 3:30 a.m. today, my friend and I were walking around our town center. Also before this, saw glowing eyes in some trees and took photos of it. We saw the glowing eyes in person and on the camera, but when we checked the photos, they weren't there. Also, I've heard a putrid smell is recognizable while a skinwalker is nearby. Anyways, we were leaving around that time when we heard and saw a dog shaking, not in a scared way, and looked over and saw a presumed adult walking a medium-sized dog about 100 to 150 feet away. I then looked to my friend and reassured him that it was just a dog on a walk. We looked back and saw a pretty large wolf/coyote looking animal. Immediately we became super uncomfortable and almost in a fight or flight feeling. We started to back away slowly as we believed it started approaching us, then speed walking into a nearby alley away from the animal. Instead of walking home alone, we Ubered since we both felt unsafe. We were both unsure of what exactly we saw, but we came to the possible conclusion that it could be a skinwalker. It seemed to be larger than a Great Dane, with scruffy fur and a sort of puffy, also scruffy tail. Its face was fairly small, and it was pretty skinny too. Its length to width ratio was completely off. My friend and I were both pretty distraught, obviously, and still are extremely uncomfortable. I'm just looking for possible pointers or help as to what this animal may be, because Google and TikTok are extremely unhelpful, repeating the same information. I'm a fairly young person, but in my life I've had quite a few experiences on my own, and I also have some stories of my family's experiences. I can share them all with time, but today I'll be sharing my experience with something I can only describe as troll-like. It was around 2015 when this happened. It was 10 p.m. and I was walking home from my grandparents' house to my house. My house was directly in front of my grandparents' house at the time, maybe not even 20 feet apart. My grandma was on the porch saying goodbye after we had talked for a bit. I started walking down the steps and I hear a very strange sound. I've never found proper words to describe the sound. The closest I can get is to a horse hooves on a window. It sent shivers down my spine. My grandma played it off, so I continued walking. At this point, she had gone in the house. I was halfway home when I looked down the yard. At the end of my grandparents' house stood a tall, hairy humanoid creature. It was about 10 foot. It was huge and covered in reddish-brown hair. It resembled a human in shape and features, but it just wasn't human. It started walking towards me. I couldn't move. It only walked maybe 6 foot before stopping. I just stared at it, and it stared at me. It wasn't moving, so I ran towards my house as fast as I could. When I got on my porch, I looked back, and it had started walking back to the end of my grandparents' house again. A few nights later, my mom was watching me walk to my grandparents' house. I didn't see anything and got there safely. My mom told me that she saw the same thing at the end of my grandparents' house. She said it was standing outside my uncle's window. It looked at her, and she looked at it, but it didn't move from its spot. She described it in the same way as I did. We researched things together, but never found anything like it. After that, maybe 2 to 3 days go by, and my dad was outside at around 9 p.m. He was making sure he locked the car. When he was out there, he saw it standing under a motion light we had in the yard between our houses. He also described it in the same way. He said it didn't acknowledge him, but he quickly went back inside. The day after that, my uncle left. For the rest of our years living there, we didn't see it again. My uncle's room was at the end of our grandparents' house. He's not a good person, and there are a few other stories about things like this when he's around, plus his own story. My parents and I are sure it was there because of him. It's still so creepy to think about. I've never found any creature resembling this since. I'm sorry if my description of it is bad. I'm not sure how to describe it. I just stumbled across this sub and decided to post my story. I will try to make this as straightforward as possible, considering I'm boarding a flight in half an hour actually to go visit my hometown and my parents where this happened. But here it is. When I was around 18 years old, I had been paying my ex-girlfriend at the time a visit and ended up losing track of time. It was around 1 in the morning at the time, and the dead of winter, I would say, maybe late January or February. Whilst relaxing with my girlfriend, I had neglected to pay attention to the weather or even look out of the window at the time, considering darkness falls in Lancaster County by around 4:30 on the winter time. A very intense snow squall rolled in and had developed into a blizzard. After I didn't realize this as well as the time, I concluded that for some reason, the smartest move would be to leave and make the around 25 to 30 minute drive, even in clear weather, back to my house. Where I live is rather remote, the Amish capital of the world actually if you're unfamiliar with Lancaster. But it's miles and miles of rolling hills, crop fields and woods with several small towns scattered amongst them. After 10 minutes into the drive, I am having a very difficult time seeing through the endless onslaught of fluffy snow, and the fact that I had left my glasses in my girlfriend's bedroom. I was driving at maybe 15 to 20 miles per hour considering the roads had not yet been plowed and were pretty slick. I got to a familiar portion of my drive about 2 or 3 miles from my old high school. As I'm creeping down the country back roads, I can barely make out some sort of color in my low beams about 20 yards in front of me. Curiously, I angled my front end toward the thing that I was seeing, which was also on my side of the road. As I got close enough to make out what I was seeing, I realized there was a hunched old woman in some kind of blankets and long skirt. Instantly I was thinking, this is my chance to be a good Samaritan and save a life. It was all of 5 degrees outside that night, and this old woman was very far into the nothingness of the land, with no known homes around. I crept up next to her and rolled down my window. At this point, she was no longer being illuminated by my headlights, and was alongside my car, maybe around 6 feet outside of my passenger side window, in the heavy snow. My initial thoughts are, this old woman must have dementia or Alzheimer's, some sort of neurological disease. I called up my window to her.
Excuse me, ma'am. Are you in need of any help? What are you doing out here? You'll freeze.
She didn't respond, and as a matter of fact, just kept slowly creeping forward through the snow. I used my phone flashlight now to get a better view of her. She was wrapped in colorful blankets and had one sort of shroud in her head, so I could not see her face. I also took note that it didn't seem like she had any shoes on. Once more I asked,
Ma'am, why don't you let me take you somewhere warm and we can get you some help?
She stopped walking. I was already beginning to shiver just from the cold wind blowing through my window. The snow was still coming down just as hard as ever. She just stood there, facing away from me.
Lady, can you hear me?
I asked, not quite annoyed, but confused. Almost as soon as I finished asking this, the old woman swiveled towards my window and stood straight up. This tiny decrepit old woman became a presence like I had never seen. Suddenly the frail woman stood tall, taller than me, maybe 6'3" or 4 inches. Her face was not hers. It seemed as though whatever it was had on a hyper-realistic old woman's mask, and the largest, most soul-piercing baby blue eyes I have ever seen in my life. So large, in fact, it appeared like they were not even naturally possible for a human to have, but nonetheless, they were beaming at me from behind the holes that were vacant where the old woman's own eyes should have been. The sight took my breath away. Without hesitating, I accelerated my car and slipped a bit in the snow. Long story short, I ended up getting home after calling my ex and telling her to lock her doors. I mentioned it to my parents and they said it was probably some sick criminal trying to rob some sorry sucker like myself. I say to myself that it's probably all it was, but something about the almost animated movements it made, the way it seemingly added feet onto its height before my eyes, and its own eyes. I can still picture them so vividly all these years later. They were not natural. Whatever I saw out there surely would have succumbed to the elements. In a small town like mine, it would have made the news surely. I'm a believer in the paranormal, and ghosts and such, but that was a physical being. I just can't explain better than this what I saw, let alone give a plausible explanation. Last night when I was using the bathroom, I heard a noise. Who has seen the film Annihilation? You know the bear thingy in it that mimics people talking? It sounded like that, but kind of like it was choking or gurgling. Then some dogs started barking, and I heard like a raspy imitation of the dogs barking. Then it stopped. Dead silence, apart from the noise of my shower. About an hour later, when having a treat after dinner, through a split in my curtains, I saw something dashing around, but figured it was just tree branches. Went to bed, woke up, did normal stuff I would do on a bank holiday from my school. Literally about 15 minutes ago, my dog started freaking out and twisting her head and jumping and clawing at the back door as if something was outside. Usually for a cat or squirrel she would do this. I was spooked considering it's dark and 4:30 in the late autumn UK. I caught a glimpse of a tall shadow darting across my garden. It looked like that of an ape or a monkey swinging. I shined my torch outside, but I couldn't see anything. Anyone know what this is? I tried to tell my mom, but she didn't think otherwise of it. I keep hearing things outside, like rustling. But I live in a populated town, on a populated road. And that's it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please let me know which one was your favorite. Please leave a comment and leave a like. If you like these stories and you'd like to hear more of them, please subscribe to the channel, as I would love to continue doing these. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a Patreon description below, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.